Good morning, fellas, and welcome back to Me Plays Games. My name is Matt, and most fully evolved Pokemon are at least decently strong. When starter Pokemon reach their final form, they usually have base stat totals in the low 500s or so. Pseudo-legendaries have a total of 600, and legendaries can get as high as 780 thanks to Mega Evolution, or 1125 thanks to whatever Eternamax Eternatus is supposed to be. This video is not going to be about those Pokemon. Today, we'll be looking at the weakest fully evolved Pokemon. We'll be ranking them by base stat totals, and talking about what they contribute to the game despite their low stats, because a lot of them do have gimmicks or niches that help them stand out, or at least explain why they exist. There are 17 Pokemon with base stat totals under 400, and we're going to talk about them all. Alright, let's get started. The first 6 Pokemon fill pretty much the same niche in their respective regions. Butterfree, Beedrill, and Beautifly have base stat totals of 395, Ledian has 390, Dustox has 385, and Kricketune has 384. All of them are bug types you can find early on in the game, and they reach their final form at unusually low levels. Most of them are fully evolved by level 10, but Ledibud doesn't evolve into Ledian until level 18? Really? Anyway, these Pokemon aren't ones you're meant to keep on your team for the whole game. Since they evolve quickly, you'll have a Pokemon in your party that's stronger than most of the stuff you're gonna fight, at least in the early game. As your adventure goes on, they start to get outclassed, so there's a good chance you'll replace them on your team with something else. Your starter Pokemon typically won't evolve till around level 16, so having a fully evolved Pokemon at level 10 is pretty nice, even though it won't pull its weight through the rest of the game. Early route bugs evolve faster than any other Pokemon in the game, so it's a good way to demonstrate the evolution mechanic. One other thing I'd like to point out, you might have noticed that the Gen 1 bug, Beedrill, and Butterfree have the same base stat total, but in Gen 3, Beautifly has 10 more points than its counterpart, Dustox. That's because for whatever reason, Beautifly's special attack was buffed by 10 points in Gen 6, but Dustox didn't get a corresponding stat boost. Usually, Pokemon that are counterparts of each other will both get their stats changed at the same time. Nidoking and Nidoqueen both got buffed in Gen 6, Solrock and Lunatone got buffed in Gen 7, and Zacian and Zamazenta got nerfed in Gen 9. So Dustox getting left behind is pretty unusual, and pretty unfortunate. Oh well, not like either of them were making much noise in battle either way. Next on the list are 2 single-stage Gen 3 Pokemon, Sableye and Mawile. They're tied with a base stat total of 380, and depending on which game you're playing, you can catch them in Granite Cave. Sableye is hanging out there in Sapphire and Emerald, and Mawile is there in Ruby. Both of them got solid Mega Evolutions in Gen 6, with Mawile's attack stat going through the roof thanks to huge power, and Sableye becoming a defensive beast. But in Gen 3, they're both pretty weak. You can catch them with just 1 gym badge, so they're a little stronger than the mostly unevolved Pokemon you're fighting. They also have pretty good typings. Mawile is Pure Steel in Gen 3, which resists basically everything, and Sableye is Dark Ghost, which has no weaknesses in its debut generation. Sableye is also useful in Brawly's Fighting Gym. In Sapphire, the only move Brawly has that can hit Sableye is Makuhita's Knockoff, which is just 20 base power. In Emerald, Sableye can't get hit at all. Brawly's Pokemon in this game only know fighting-type moves and defensive screens. Mawile isn't much help in the Doofer Gym since it's weak to fighting moves, but having a Steel type early in the game is pretty valuable. Many Pokemon won't know a move that deals neutral or super effective damage against Steel, so its defensive profile can make the upcoming routes a little bit easier. It doesn't match up all that well against the Electric and Fire gyms, but a Steel type is generally a good asset. It's not the best Steel type out there by a long shot, but people might consider keeping Mawile on their team anyway, because resisting virtually everything is nice. Aron can also be found in Granite Cave, but it's Steel Rock type, which is a worse combination than Pure Steel. Having 2 4x weaknesses is brutal, so Sableye and Mawile are mostly useful because of their typings. A lot of trainers won't have the tools to deal with a Dark Ghost type or a Pure Steel type. Of course, nowadays Mawile is Steel Fairy, which is also a good type combination. They're not incredibly strong, but they still play a role in the Hoenn region. The next Pokemon on the list is Cantonian Farfetch'd. Sirfetch'd does exist now, but that's only an evolution of Galarian Farfetch'd. The original form still doesn't evolve, so it's fair game for this video. Its base stat total is 377, which is terrible, but its 90 attack stat isn't half bad. It's not fantastic, but it's the same as Pokemon like Raichu, Scrafty, and freaking Dracovish. Although it's worth noting its attack was actually buffed in Gen 7. Before that, it only had 65 attack, making its base stat total 352. The only way to obtain a Farfetch'd in Red and Blue, and Fire Red Leaf Green for that matter, is via an in-game trade. It's a normal flying type, which Kanto has a no short supply of, but by trading a Spear to get yourself a Farfetch'd, not only do you get a unique Pokemon, but you also get boosted experience. The traded Farfetch'd will level up 50% faster than the rest of your team. So even though it's weaker, it's easier to level up than the rest of your party, making it more useful than a wild Farfetch'd would be. There are better in-game trades in Gen 1, but several of the Pokemon you get can also be caught elsewhere in the game. The trade Farfetch'd is one of a kind, and it can kinda pull its weight thanks to the boosted experience. It also has a unique held item, the Leak. If Farfetch'd holds it, its critical hit chance is also boosted. Coming in at 8th place is this goofball Spinda. It's got 60 in every stat across the board, for a total of 360. and I'm fairly certain that was on purpose. 360 is the number of degrees in a circle, which is pretty fitting for a Pokemon with spin in its name. Spinda is also known for the circular spots on its body, which makes pretty much every Spinda in existence unique. Spinda can have one of over 4 billion patterns, which are based on either its personality value or its encryption constant, depending on which game it's in. It's got 4 spots that can each be in one of 256 positions, resulting in this number of possible patterns. Well, sort of. Some patterns look identical to each other, because it's possible for the game to play spots entirely off of Spinda's body. So the number of distinguishable patterns is closer to 3.95 billion, but that's neither here nor there. Having so many unique Spinda patterns means if you catch one, there's a good chance it'll be one of a kind. Your odds are especially good if you catch a shiny Spinda. The odds of someone else having the exact same pattern on a shiny Spinda are basically 0. So Spinda isn't a Pokemon that's great in battle, but it's got a pretty cool unique property. Next up on our list is probably the worst fully evolved Pokemon in the battle department, Unown. Its base stat total is 336, a full 24 points lower than Spinda, and it only ever learns one move, Hidden Power. It's a 60 base power move that can be any type except normal and fairy. What type it is depends on the Pokemon's individual values. If Unown has perfect IVs in every stat, it'll be Dark type. But it's a Psychic type Pokemon, which means it won't get the same type attack bonus in that case. Unown is absolutely worthless in battle, but what it does bring to the Pokemon world is mysteries. There are 28 forms of Unown, 26 for the letters of the Latin alphabet and 2 for punctuation, namely the question and exclamation marks. Since they're shaped like letters and punctuation, it's thought that Unown might predate written language in the Pokemon world, and that writing systems may have taken heavy inspiration from Unown stuck to walls, but the jury's still out on that. It's also said that whenever multiple Unown come together, an odd power emerges. They can change reality at will and conjure up all sorts of stuff. They're borderline worthless on their own, but incredibly powerful in groups. So it's not a Pokemon you're meant to use in battle or anything, just one that exists for lore purposes. Next up is a tie between Delibird and Luvdisc, both clocking in with a base stat total of 330. Let's start with Luvdisc. This one just makes me sad, man. Its attacking stats suck, its defenses suck, it's got a pretty good speed stat, but that doesn't matter when it can't take advantage of it at all. Generation 5 introduced another heart-shaped fish Pokemon in Alomomola, and it's actually really good competitively. It's got a base HP stat of 165, and access to the ability Regenerator as well as the move Wish, making it a good stall Pokemon. For whatever reason though, it's not an evolution to Luvdisc. So, what does this Goofus Maloofus have to offer? Well, in most games it's available in, Wild Luvdisc have a 50% chance of holding a heart scale. So by catching it or using a move like Thief or Cuff It, you can get some heart scales. Then you can give them to the move reminder so your Pokemon can remember old moves. There are other ways to find heart scales, but stealing them from Wild Luvdisc is probably easier than whipping out the item finder and hoping for the best. Nowadays, farming heart scales is a thing of the past, since you can reteach a Pokemon old moves at any point for free. So in modern Pokemon games, Luvdisc is basically worthless. Its one use case isn't a thing anymore, and it's completely useless in the battle department. Its stats are horrible, its move pool is basically non-existent, it burned my house down, it's outclassed by millions of other Swift Swim Pokemon, and the addition of Alomomola makes it virtually obsolete. But hey, at least its shiny is nice. Delibird is similarly awful in battle, but its stats are slightly more balanced and it can hit a little bit harder. Too bad its level up moveset looks like this. Oh wait, sorry, that's its Gen 6 learn set, hold on. You know, that's not much better. Yup, up until Gen 6, the only move Delibird learned by level up is its signature move, Present, and this move is awful. First off, it's got 90% accuracy, but if Delibird has the ability Hustle, it'll be 72% accurate. And if the move does hit, it'll do random damage. It'll either be 40, 80, or 120 base power, with 40 being the most likely outcome. But 20% of the time, it'll heal the target instead. Oh, and it's also normal type. Delibird is Ice Flying, meaning it doesn't even get stabbed from its own signature move. But wait, it somehow gets worse. In Gold and Silver, the move is bugged beyond belief. The damage the move does is completely wrong. Regardless of Delibird's attack stat, it'll always use Present with an attack stat of 10. For comparison, that's roughly the attack stat of a level 5 Bulbasaur. The target's defense stat is always 2 in the damage calculation, and Delibird's level is replaced by any of these numbers, depending on what type the target is. If you use Present against a normal type, the game will treat Delibird as a level 0 Pokemon with an attack stat of 10, and the opponent will have 2 defense, regardless of how strong Delibird and its opponent actually are. But hey, nowadays it gets Drill Peck by level up too. Whoop-dee-doo. Delibird does learn other moves via TM, but that's not going to save it from being an atrociously weak Pokemon. But apparently, time travel will save it. In Generation 9, the future Paradox Pokemon Iron Bundle was introduced, and this guy's an absolute beast. It's got a great base stat total of 570, including 124 special attack and 136 speed. Instead of being Ice Flying like Delibird, Iron Bundle is Ice Water. That's a good defensive combination, but having Stab on water moves is also a great asset. The combination of Freeze Dry and Hydro Pump hits everything for at least neutral damage. Iron Bundle was so powerful, in fact, it was banned from competitive singles, so it's hanging out in the Uber's tier with the legendaries, some other Paradox Pokemon, and also a bunch of regular Gen 9 Pokemon. Yeah, there was a lot of power creep this generation. But why was regular Delibird created in the first place? I don't know, man. Doesn't really have a niche in battle or an interesting gimmick like most of the other Pokemon we've talked about do. Like, Present is kind of a gimmick, but it's a horrible gimmick. They could have come up with a way better concept. Its stats are horrible. Ice Flying is a bad type combination. It committed tax fraud. Present is one of the worst moves of all time. It just kind of exists. Having a Pokemon version of Santa Claus is fun and cool and all, but it doesn't bring much else to the table. The next Pokemon on the list is Ditto. Its base stats are 48 across the board, giving it a total of 288. The same as Barboach, Ekans, and Inkay. But thanks to one of Ditto's gimmicks, it almost never uses most of its stats. The first thing Ditto usually does is transform into the opposing Pokemon, either with the move Transform or its signature ability Imposter. Ditto copies all the other Pokemon's stats and moves, but said moves only have 5 power points when they're copied. Unfortunately, Ditto is usually just a worse version of whatever it transforms into. Limited power points are of course a bit of an issue, and transformed Pokemon keep their own HP stat instead of copying the opponent's. Ditto's base HP is 48, meaning it's most likely turning into a less bulky version of the Pokemon it's copying. Since Ditto does copy the opponent's speed stat, there's no guarantee it'll move first. Every turn will be a speed tie, in which case the turn order is decided at random. So to mitigate that, Ditto has to hold a Choice Scarf, which boosts its speed, but only lets it use the first move it picks till it switches out. So if you're copying a setup sweeper with a boosting move, Ditto can't use that boosting move then start attacking. But Ditto can be effectively used as a revenge killer. When it transforms, it also copies the target's stat changes. So if your opponent killed one of your Pokemon with a Nasty Plot boosted move, Ditto can switch in and use those same Nasty Plot boosts. Plus the Choice Scarf speed boost to knock them out. So Ditto can make some noise in the battle department from time to time, but usually you're gonna be better off picking Pokemon that, you know, have their own moves and stats and such. Ditto is also useful for breeding Pokemon. As long as a Pokemon is able to breed, it can make eggs with a Ditto. That makes it easier to breed for shinies, or competitive Pokemon with high stats. You don't have to worry about finding 2 Pokemon that are compatible with each other. Virtually everything works with Ditto. So despite its low base stat total, it's got plenty of uses in and out of battle. If you're enjoying yourself so far, consider subscribing to Me Plays Games. I also recently relaunched my Let's Play channel, Miles Per Game. I just finished recording a Let's Play Pokemon Scarlet, so new episodes will be coming out throughout July, and be on the lookout for more games in the future. The third weakest fully evolved Pokemon is Smeargle, and it's got a really neat gimmick as well. Its signature move is Sketch, and in fact that's the only move it can learn. It has 1 power point, and when you use it, it copies whatever move your target last used. Unlike other moves that can copy or call other moves, Sketch is permanently replaced by whatever Smeargle gets. That means Smeargle can learn literally every move in the game, except Struggle and Chatter. So if you run into a Wailord that used Water Spout on you, well now you've got Water Spout as well. It won't do much damage, but hey, Smeargle learns Sketch 10 times between levels 1 and 91, so it can get a full moveset and then some. Smeargle's stats kinda have to be horrible to balance it out. If it had half decent stats and it could use literally any move in the game, it'd become pretty overpowered. So its stats come up to a pathetic 250. Smeargle's base stat total is less than Blissey's HP stat alone. Smeargle does see use competitively though, because learning every move is valuable in double battles. It can use any combination of support moves to make its teammates' lives easier. The second weakest fully evolved Pokemon is Shedinja, coming in with just 236 stat points. Shedinja's gimmick is it only has 1 HP, but in exchange, it's immune to every move that isn't super effective, thanks to its ability Wonder Guard. That means some Pokemon just can't hit Shedinja at all. It's Bug Ghost type, meaning the only types of moves that can hit it are Fire, Flying, Rock, Ghost, and Dark. Thanks to this trait, it occasionally sees play in Ubers in certain generations, because some legendaries usually don't have a move that Shedinja's weak to. Kyogre, Zygarde, and Xerneas usually get walled by Shedinja forever, among others. Shedinja's not a fantastic Pokemon though, because it's not immune to other forms of damage. It can still get poisoned by Toxic, buffeted by Sand, or impaled by entry hazards, all of which would kill it instantly. Having just 1 health means it's completely unable to use certain moves and items. Rest and Substitute will always fail, Harden effectively does nothing, Life Orb, Flame Orb, and Toxic Orb will kill it in 1 turn, Leftovers also do nothing, Double Edge kills it immediately, Final Gambit only deals 1 damage, and so on and so on. Another thing Shedinja adds to the game is a unique quirk in the evolution system. Nincada evolves into Ninjask level 20, but if you have an empty slot in your party and a Pokeball in your bag, Shedinja will also appear. So depending on how you look at it, you could say Nincada evolves into 2 Pokemon at the same time, which would make it the only Pokemon to do so. There are so many quirks Shedinja brings to the table, I could spend an entire video talking about them all. One other thing worth noting though, Shedinja's total of 236 is a little bit misleading. Unlike most Pokemon, its defense and special defense stats don't do anything. Every move that does hit it will always knock it out, no matter how bulky it tries to be. So if we just count the stats it actually uses, Shedinja's base stat total would be 161, which would be the lowest in the whole game. But since Shedinja has defensive stats that are more than 0, the weakest fully evolved Pokemon, according to base stat totals at least, is Solo Form Wishiwashi. Sort of. Solo form has a base stat total of just 175, which makes it the weakest Pokemon in the entire game, even worse than the weakest unevolved Pokemon. But thanks to its ability Schooling, Wishiwashi is usually in its school form, where a ton of wimpy fish come together to create a behemoth of a Pokemon. This school form has an incredible total of 620. The pathetic Solo form only activates when it drops below 25% of its max HP. Fun fact, school form Wishiwashi has a base speed stat of 30. Solo form speed is 40. So turning into the weakest Pokemon in the universe actually makes it faster. It's a million times weaker and a million times less bulky, but I was surprised to find out one of its stats actually went up. Well, there it is, fellas. Every fully evolved Pokemon with a base stat total under 400. Just about every Pokemon in this video has some sort of niche, or some cool move or ability that makes them stand out. And then there's Luvdisc. I typically include legendaries on my team if it's feasible, and even if I don't, I'm always looking for ways to make my squad stronger. But it's also nice to stop and appreciate the weaker Pokemon, because oftentimes they bring something completely different to the table. Most of them obviously aren't good and won't appear in any serious battles, but they have a ton of other things to offer as well. Well, that's all I got for today. I'll see you all in the next video. Good night, fellas. Sleep well.